It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Red Tulips Consulting. We're here with season 7. So glad you're joining us. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp, CAEACNP, and I'm so glad you're here for this exciting year of so many great topics. So don't forget to subscribe. This week, we're joined by first-time guest and my good friend, Jerica Thurman, CAE. She's here to talk with us about a really important topic, inclusive communications and making meaningful connections. It's January 20th, 2025. Episode 269 starts now. Hey, everybody, it's Monday, January 20th, and it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. Thanks for joining us on this very special day here in the United States. It is the holiday where we remember one of our greatest civil rights activists, Martin Luther King Jr., and all the work he did to help us be a more inclusive society. It's also Inauguration Day here in the United States, and whether or not you like our new president, it's another example of a peaceful change of government. So thanks, America, for being peaceful this time. So today we are talking about inclusive communications. And my guest, Jerica Thurman, has been a longtime friend of mine and one of the rising stars in association management that I have had the privilege to know over the years. And she's going to share her insights and information about that really important topic. But before we dive into that and get to know more about Jerica, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. And a general reminder to take a moment and follow us or subscribe to us on your favorite podcast service. We are everywhere. So, Jerica, welcome to the show. You're a first-time guest, which is so exciting and actually too long in coming since I've known you for so long. And you're just like such a wonderful professional and wonderful person and a great friend. And I love working with you. Could you say hello to the audience and tell them a little about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Cecilia. It's an honor to join your podcast. And likewise, I've enjoyed our collaboration and our friendship over the years. Again, my name is Jerica Thurman, and I am president and CEO of Elation Communications. I'm also a CAE. My company specializes in providing marketing and communication support and conference management for nonprofits. We're located in the Washington, D.C. metro area here in Maryland.
Oh, that's great. Yes. But you will work with clients outside the DC area, correct?
Absolutely. And we have. So, absolutely. We have a national reach.
Excellent. So, and thank you for promoting CAE because, as you know, that's near and dear to my heart as well. So, thanks for mentioning that. I think it's an important credential for people in our profession. So, I've known you for a long time, but the audience has not. So, could you tell us how you got interested in focusing on inclusive communications as your specialty?
Sure. So, as a child, I learned the importance of celebrating people's differences. I grew up with an identical twin sister, and our family and friends would often highlight our differences to help them tell us apart. So, my sister and I enjoy being alike. We talk the same, we dress the same, and we like the same things. But we also desire to be known for our differences. And so our differences is what make us unique. And so I've learned over the years in my professional career as a communication specialist that no matter how much people are alike, we all have differences, and these differences should be celebrated. And that's what inclusive communication is all about. It's about recognizing and appreciating people's differences.
Well, and that is an excellent explanation. And I have had the opportunity to meet your sister, and she is identical in appearance, but I noticed she had a very different personality in
Mhm.
some ways than you. And so I think that is a great example. I have three sisters and three brothers, and we are not twins at all, but we have similarities, but we're also very different. And so, sometimes when we're talking to each other, we don't understand each other. So,
Mhm.
what's a good way for people? Let's say you're meeting somebody for the first time, you don't really know anything about them. What's a good way for you to open a conversation with someone? And what are some listening cues we can use to have more inclusive communications?
Sure. So inclusive communication first starts with active listening, as you stated. Really getting to know who you're talking to, and it connects to the common quote that people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And in this case, in a business world, it really is spending and putting out the effort to really get to know your audience, get to know who you're talking with, who you're interacting with, and then using that knowledge to communicate and provide messaging that best resonates with them. So inclusive communication is focused on ensuring that everyone can access, understand, and engage with the information being communicated.
And so when you say that, is it all about vocabulary? Is it asking people questions about their background? What's the best way to educate ourselves?
Well, I think it's all the above, right? So because there's we're diverse in many ways. So whether it's cultural, linguistic, ethnic, gender, accessibility, there's
Mhm.
always there are many ways that we are diverse, and so essentially it's paying attention to those characteristics and appreciating the differences in those areas, and essentially, this is all about relationship. You're not going to understand all that in one conversation. So, as you get to know people and you actually focus on building those relationships, then that helps to foster understanding and respect for others that are different than you. And
Mhm.
then, as a professional, working to foster environments where these differences in people cause an atmosphere of belonging, right? And so,
Right.
um, so this is the basis of inclusive communication. It's really, I think, really important to understand that even in a homogeneous environment, there's still differences, right? And so no one's alike. So essentially, no matter how much we have in common with people in the room, there's still differences. And so this makes the importance of inclusive communication relevant anywhere and everywhere.
I'm glad you said that because one of the things I learned the hard way becoming a grown up is not to assume people don't know things.
Mhm.
So a habit I've gotten into is asking a question first, like before I start lecturing somebody about something, which I made the mistake of doing very early in my career, started telling a manager that I supported as a administrative assistant all about Pearl S. Buck. And I had just read this book about her and all this stuff. And it turned out this person had read like every single thing Pearl Buck ever wrote, was like a fan of Pearl Buck, spent a lot of time doing Pearl S. Buck things growing up. And for those of you who don't know who Pearl S. Buck is, she's an American author who grew up in Asia, and many of her books are about life in Asia. Some of them focus on, Asian life, and some of them focused on people, expatriates living in Asia. But she's written a lot of interesting books, mostly in the first half of the 20th century. So here I am telling somebody who probably knew way more about her than I did.
Mhm.
So that is not necessarily inclusive communication, but it's an example of not making assumptions about people, which I think gets in the way of good communication because we assume things about people instead of just asking them. So, you can just ask people, oh, do you know who Pearl S. Buck is? Oh, well, yes, I love Pearl S. Buck. Great. I just read another book about her that I really liked. You might like it if you haven't read it. So I always ask people because you can't tell what people know by looking at them. And the other thing about inclusive communication is you don't know everything about a person from looking at them. One of the
Mhm.
things that I really got a big dose of experience in is disability. Last year, I had a short term disability when I
Mhm.
broke my leg. And so, learning, a lot of people came up to me and told me their stories about times where they had a short term disability. You would not know it looking at them at that point because they were back to walking without assistance. But a lot of those sorts of things are hidden. People might have arthritis, they might have multiple sclerosis, they
Mhm.
may have a disability related to hearing or vision or sensory processing. So you don't know things about people just from looking at them. We have to ask and we have to be considerate. And I don't know how you feel about this, Jericho, but I think compassion and empathy have a lot to do with inclusive communication.
Absolutely, Cecilia. You've hit the key points, and I really like your statement about managing your assumptions, and essentially that's also managing biases and being mindful that we bring as a human being we bring those things with us to the table, to the conversation with others, but we have to be more mindful of of those of that and work to overcome that so that we're staying open-minded, right? We're not seeing things completely through our own lens, right? We're looking to expand and grow and better understand. And so those things are have to be intentional. It's not just a natural thing for us to do as human beings, because many times we're just focused on our perspective of the world.
That's
And so I like your point about accessibility, and I want to also emphasize that to help our audiences better understand this concept of inclusive communication, we developed a framework. In the framework, it outlines seven reasons why inclusive communication is important. And the number one reason is accessibility issues. And so the others are representation, equity, engagement, respect and dignity, effectiveness, and social justice. And our framework is available on our website, and I'll share more of that information before we close. But yes, that is a very key, essential a point, because many times people don't think about how to better serve the disability community in just everyday business practices. So you raise a very key point.
well, and I think a lot of it is people feel awkward about asking people questions. Oh, I see somebody in a wheelchair. I'm not comfortable, so I'm not going to talk to them. Or they act strangely. I'm just going to say it. People act strangely around people in wheelchairs or on a cart because they're not walking on 2 feet like most people do. So people get uncomfortable because they don't know what to say. Uh, I experience this. I have been going to ASA annual meeting for years. A lot of people know me. I know a lot of people. And yet, because I was in a wheelchair, there were many awkward conversations
Yes,
just because
yes.
of the wheelchair. It's like people saw the chair, not the person in the chair. And that's an example. I think, don't just see the chair or the cart or whatever assistive device somebody might be using. See the person using it. It's a tool. It's not who they are. So people wouldn't look me in the eye. They would like talk down to me like I was a little kid, or they would just act like I wasn't there, because the problem, like at a networking reception, is they're designed for people who stand on 2 feet, and they're not designed for people using wheelchairs or carts or whatever other assistive device they might have. So you're just sitting there kind of like twiddling your thumbs, like, oh, what am I supposed to do now? Because nobody's talking to me. But a lot of people were kind and helpful to me, but I was often left alone at events because people were like, oh, you know, um, she's in a wheelchair and I'm standing up. I'll just talk to this person standing next to me. And that's what happens. It's a natural human thing. But the thing about humans is we can overcome some of these things. We can retrain ourselves and learn new behaviors. So I wanted to get your input on this idea. There's an old saying, if you want to be understood, seek to understand.
Exactly.
But I think part of that starts with us doing introspection, doing a self inventory. What are your thoughts on that in becoming better at inclusive communication?
Well, that's the root of being an effective, inclusive communicator, and that is to seek to understand. And to your point, asking questions is certainly a vital and effective tool to better understand someone else. But I think it goes beyond that. I mean, sometimes if you're really trying to understand a different culture, a different language, you take some time, some of your personal time, right, to either read or whatever resource you need to reference in order to really gain a deeper understanding. Seek to understand also means, and like to your point about assumptions, and I think this is a great um, uh, point to stay here for a minute, because seek to understand also means getting rid of what you like you're saying, what you think as someone else or is thinking, or and really putting all of your um, thoughts aside and really seeking to hear that person, to see that person, right? And to connect with that person. And so, even in your example of being in a wheelchair while you were recovering, I think that's a critical point, because I served a few years working with the disability community. And one thing I learned, even thinking that I was showing empathy and care, that um, many people who are disability with disabilities, they wanted to be respected and acknowledge that they are empowered still to do certain things for themselves, right? And so I found myself having to catch myself, because when I'm going to open the door, they may not want me to open the door for them. They want to do it, but they might need me to help in another way. So asking those questions, how may I help you, will then allow them to say, well, I don't need help doing that, but you could help me doing this, right? And so even seeking to understand, still, like you're saying, requires a process of learning. Because even when you think you're helping someone else, it may not be help to them, right? And so you only really clarify that through taking those steps, as you're saying, to have these conversations, to really understand where is a good point to connect with that person.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, though, about asking people if they would like some help. I
Mhm.
always do that now. I just ask people because, as a very independent person and self-reliant person my whole life, I realized that, and this was even before I had my own injury that affected my mobility. I realized, well, these people are out and about on their own. Maybe they don't need any help. Maybe they don't want it. I might be angry too if somebody opened the door thinking I couldn't do it for myself. So I always ask, I offer. I say, oh, would you like some help, or do you need some help? And wow, the power of questions, that could be a whole other episode. Power of questions to learn, to create relationships, to help ourselves be those people we would like to be someday, the person that our dog thinks we are, as the saying goes. I love that. Uh, so, Jerica, what are some other things that, oh, I know what I want to ask you. Okay, yeah, these questions, they pop in my head and then I think of another question. But no, this is a question I want to ask you. So, language is so important, right? In inclusive communications. It's not just being sensitive to who people are, but it's what language is going to be understood, like what words, even in the United States, people use different words for things. Like in the Midwest, a soda is a Coca-Cola. But in the upper Midwest, like Nebraska, if you say soda, they give you an Alka-Seltzer. And these states are right next to each other, right? So words are different. So we need to know the words. There's a movement in Canada that's been going on for a couple of years to stop using the word stakeholder. So here in the United States, we say stakeholders because somebody has a stake in something, they're invested in it. And that comes, I think, from history, like you would make a, claim your stake in the gold rush, for example. But
Mhm.
in Canada, the First Peoples are offended by that word because that's what the white immigrants who came and ended up taking over, who migrated there and settled Canada, would put stakes in the ground to, outline the land, the property that they were claiming. And so they have decided they don't like that word anymore because it reminds them of losing their land. So, uh, what are your thoughts on that? Like trying to be sensitive to shifting language as we evolve.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to know your audience. So, as you're mentioning, in different regions, different locations of the world, Language and terminology means different things. So essentially, it's the principle that you must develop as a professional to understand and know your audience, and that's part of the seven reasons why inclusive communication is important in the framework that I mentioned. And essentially, that a tool outlines accessible content, culturally sensitive messaging, as you're talking about language and terminology, visual representations, and feedback mechanisms, and of course, workplace culture. So all of these areas are essential to a helping a business be successful at implementing inclusive communication.
Well, and I think also trying to communicate through associations, since a lot of our audience are different kinds of nonprofits, and we talk a lot about associations. I think helping educate our members about how to talk to people that maybe they're working with. So I've done a lot of work in the healthcare area, for example, a lot of policy. I've worked at a healthcare professional association, had a lot of clients in that area. Uh, but when my husband had his hip replaced back in 2023, um, we went to have a meeting with the surgeon, the pre-surgery meeting to answer our questions and say, here's what you need to do before the surgery, etc. So all that background. And he asked if we had any questions. And I said, well, I'm going to be his main caregiver
Mhm.
and I need to know what should I do? What do I need to know? And this surgeon looked at me and smiled and said, now, all you need to do is buy groceries and make meals. Like I'm some 1950s housewife. And so I was really surprised that somebody would speak to somebody that way when they had a legitimate caregiving question, right? So I just looked at him and said, well, doctor, you don't know me. You don't know anything about my background, but I am a professional consultant who works in healthcare. And that is not the question I'm asking you. I am asking you, what are signs that I need to be aware of in case something's going wrong post surgery? That's what I'm asking you. I know very well I need to make sure he eats. Boy, his demeanor changed dramatically after that. So I think we need to all remember again, you're a surgeon. I get that. You're awesome. I love surgeons. He did a wonderful job. I told him that later, we went in for the checkups and boy, he did a beautiful job. And I made sure to tell him that. I said, boy, doctor, I said, they had x-rays like the textbook x-ray, and he got the biggest smile on his face. So
Mhm.
that's another thing about inclusive communication is recognizing people's efforts.
Mhm.
You may be paying the surgeon to do that for you, but hey, he did a great job. So make sure he knows that. Let's talk about
Yeah,
those.
so you're absolutely hitting the key point of first of all gender references, right?
Mm.
In our language, I think another important piece, especially as relates to association professionals, is avoiding jargon. I remember when I first joined an association, it was so many acronyms I didn't know what people were talking about. And I thought, wait a minute, what is that? And at first I thought the acronym was a word, and I'm like, no, that doesn't really spell anything for me to Google.
I love that. Oh my God. I'm glad
and,
you
and,
said that.
and so that I mean literally, and so actually that became such a problem with the staff and the association that kudos to the leaders. They actually developed like a keyword guide so that we all had some kind of list of what these acronyms meant. And I mean, beyond just the acronym of the association name, I mean, actually within the work, there's always, especially if you're in a scientific or medical association, all these extra language that people, the average person does not understand. So
Mhm.
simplifying, even simplifying the message so the common person can understand is also a part of inclusive communication. And the whole point is you have to ask yourself, am I being effective? Right. And if not, these are the things that you have to be more cognizant about as you communicate. Because at the end of the day, what is the end? objective? Is it to really, inspire and motivate people to action, or just to make comments and no one understands? So you're absolutely right in the area of language and terminology. That's everything. That's the practical piece of being an inclusive communicator.
Yeah, and again, I'm so glad you said that about acronyms because I am not a fan of acronyms because sure, like if you and I know what that acronym means, like if I say to you, Jerica, oh, we got to make sure to get that NDA and you know what I'm talking about, that's fine. But if you're right, you're talking to people outside your group that don't know that. It's just annoying. And frankly, I'm just going to say it and go ahead and send me an angry postcard, listeners, if you want to. But I also think it's lazy using acronyms all the time. That's my opinion. Maybe because I'm a writer too, but I think it's lazy to use acronyms constantly. So sure, it might be like, oh, ASAP. We all know what that means, as soon as possible. But that's about as far as I like to go most of the time with an acronym because that's a commonly known one. So thank you for saying that. And I think that is a great idea to come up with a list of key terms and key acronyms so that new staff or new members really know what you're talking about. Because assuming that a new member of your organization understands all these acronyms, even in their own profession, they might be new to the profession. And so what you learn in school and maybe in an internship before you start your first job might not be the same thing as when you're actually in the job and people using these different language abbreviations. And so I think that's another thing about inclusive communication because acronyms can mean different things depending on who's using it, like ABC. That's a common acronym. It could be American Broadcasting Corporation or Associated Building and Contractors.
Well, I think the other side of the coin on this is, how does that make people feel when they don't understand these acronyms, right? So it may be, a few in the group who understands the acronym, but the others do not. And in a workplace, it's most likely that those who do not understand will not speak up because then they don't want to seem like they don't know what's going on, right? But they feel like they're disconnected, they're excluded from the conversation, and that they don't really belong. And I think that's the key point of being more cognizant of your audience and making them and going the extra mile, as you're stating, not being lazy, going the extra mile to not simplify and explain, so that before that interaction ends, there's a clear understanding that people get what was communicated and what is expected of them.
Yes. Oh, excellent advice. I love that. Now, before we wrap up this episode, this has been great. Thank you so much. You've shared so much good advice and insight in this conversation. You and I are working on something together that we're going to be launching later this year. So could you share a little bit about that with the audience?
Sure. So, Nation Communications is excited to continue our partnership with Cecilia and Rogue Tulips. We actually already kind of did some initial work with our campaign on growing awareness for inclusive communications last year. We did some video content, and in that series, we highlighted inclusive communications and ethical leadership, where Cecilia was the guest speaker on that topic. We also focused on social media, leadership roles, hiring practices, education, helping children with disabilities to learn, and ways to support people with autism as it relates to inclusive communication. We are continuing to produce content to help others learn about this important topic. In addition to the framework, we've pushed out a lot of articles and even have an infographic that's up on the site. So we're excited to continue that in this year with a new initiative of a workshop series that we'll be partnering with Cecilia on to help continue to educate professionals about becoming an inclusive communicator. So these workshops are coming soon. Some of the topics that we'll be focusing on are inclusive communications fundamentals, culturally responsive communication, digital accessibility and inclusive technology, inclusive leadership and advocacy, and interactive dialogue and empathy training, all of which we touched on today. So thank you, Cecilia, for your again your support and continual partnership in this with this initiative.
Oh, you are welcome. And I am really looking forward to continuing our collaboration together. You know, I love working with you. So, Jerica, I always like to ask my guest, what's the one thought you'd like the audience to take away today? And how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about inclusive communication and Elation Communication?
Yeah, sure. So my one thought is inclusive communication is vital to any company's bottom line because it greatly impacts productivity and overall success. And I just want to leave this one data point that 83% of millennials are more likely to be engaged at work in companies that implement inclusive communication. And so this is a must have. It's not optional. And so I'm really excited about the work that we'll be doing together. You can learn more about this initiative by going to our website, elationcommunications.com, and visit our publication tab as well as our inclusive communications tab. And there you'll be able to download the framework and learn more about our services in this area. And you can always email me at jthurman@elationcommunications.com and find me on LinkedIn at Jerica Thurman or Elation Communications.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's always great talking with you and looking forward to what we do next.
Yes, likewise. Thank you, Cecilia.
You are welcome. But unfortunately, we need to go rogue for now. But we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So please remember to follow or subscribe on your favorite service so you don't miss any of these great conversations we're having in 2025. We're already off to a great start. If you would like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. Let's have a conversation and see if we can work together. If I'm not the right person, I can probably connect you to the right person. So let's have a conversation. If you're interested in professional development and education for nonprofit management professionals, check out our education page. We are launching our spring session the first week in February, and I'm sure we have a course there that you might find of interest. So again, that's roguetulips.com. Thanks for joining us this week, everybody. And on behalf of Jerica and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.